It was a crisp autumn morning in Los Angeles. The sun was rising lazily over the city, casting golden hues across the streets. On one of those bustling sidewalks, a homeless man sat by the curb, his weathered face telling stories of hardship and endurance. His tattered clothes and worn-out shoes bore testament to the struggles he had endured. He clutched a cardboard sign that read, "Down on luck. Need help. God bless." The man's name was James. Once a promising artist, James had fallen victim to life's unpredictable turns, an economic downturn, a string of bad decisions, and the untimely death of his closest friend had all but crushed his spirit. His dreams of showcasing his artwork in galleries had been replaced by the grim reality of begging for spare change. As the day wore on, passers-by hurried by, avoiding eye contact. Some dropped coins into his cup, most simply ignored him. James, accustomed to the indifference, thanked those who offered help and silently endured the ones who didn't. By noon, James had collected a few crumpled dollar bills. His stomach growled in protest, he hadn't eaten since the previous evening. He sighed and shifted uncomfortably, wondering how long he could survive like this. That was when he noticed a man walking toward him, a tall figure, clad in a casual yet elegant outfit, his presence commanding attention without effort. James squinted as the man came closer. There was something familiar about him. The rugged face, the piercing gaze, it was Clint Eastwood. Even in his 90s, the legendary actor and director exuded charisma. James felt a surge of hope and apprehension. Here was a man who had lived the American dream, who had shaped the silver screen with his indomitable will. Could he possibly help? As Clint passed by, James mustered his courage and spoke, his voice hoarse but earnest. "Sir, can you spare $1?" Clint stopped in his tracks, turning to face James. His sharp blue eyes scanned the man before him, not with judgment but with curiosity. There was a brief silence as Clint seemed to weigh his response. Then, to James's surprise, Clint crouched down so they were at eye level. "Why $1?" Clint asked, his tone neither dismissive nor mocking, but genuinely inquisitive. James hesitated. "Well, I thought it's something most people wouldn't mind giving," he stammered. "I could get a sandwich or maybe a cup of coffee. Just something to keep me going." Clint nodded thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. Then he did something completely unexpected. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. James's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, I asked for $1, not..." "Hold on," Clint interrupted, raising a hand. "This isn't just for you to spend. It's for you to think. I'll give you this $100, but on one condition." James's curiosity piqued. "What condition?" Clint leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "I want you to tell me what you'd do with your life if money wasn't an issue. Not just today, your whole life. What would you do if you had a second chance?" James stared at Clint, the question reverberating in his mind. It wasn't something he had expected to hear, and it certainly wasn't something he had asked himself in a very long time. For years, his life had revolved around survival, not dreams or possibilities. But now, with Clint Eastwood of all people waiting for an answer, James felt an unfamiliar flicker of hope. "I used to paint," James finally said, his voice shaky. "I loved it. I even had a small exhibit once, years ago. But life got hard, really hard. I lost my studio, my supplies. Everything." Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment but in contemplation. "You loved it, huh? Why'd you stop?" James hesitated, his gaze dropping to the sidewalk. "Because love doesn't put food on the table," he muttered. "You need money to buy paint, canvases, brushes. You need connections to get noticed. I didn't have any of that. And when things fell apart, I had to let it go." Clint was silent for a moment, letting the weight of James's words settle between them. Then he spoke, his tone calm but laced with conviction. "Let me tell you something, kid. Life will knock you down. Hard. It'll take everything you've got and then some. But the ones who make it, they're the ones who find a way to stand back up. Even when it hurts. James felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to believe Clint's words, but his years on the streets had taught him that life rarely gave second chances. I don't know if I can stand back up, James admitted. Not after everything. Clint nodded slowly, as if he understood. You know what? I didn't think I could, either. When I was starting out, I was broke, rejected, and barely scraping by. They told me I was too tall, my voice was too rough, my acting wasn't good enough. But I had one thing, belief in myself. Even when nobody else believed, I did. That's what kept me going. James listened intently, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. He had never imagined a Hollywood icon like Clint Eastwood could have faced rejection and doubt. Clint leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Here's the deal, James. I'll give you this $100. But you have to use it as a seed, not a band-aid. Invest it in something that gets you closer to that guy you used to be, the guy who loved painting. Can you do that? James swallowed hard. His instinct was to protest, to say it wasn't that simple. But looking into Clint's steady gaze, he felt an undeniable pull to try. I think I can, James said, though the words came out more like a question than a statement. No, Clint said firmly, handing him the bill. You know you can. Say it. James took the money, his hands trembling. I know I can. A small smile tugged at Clint's lips. That's better. Now go prove it. With that, Clint stood up, nodded once, and walked away, leaving James holding the crisp bill and a heart full of possibilities. For a long moment, James sat frozen, the $100 bill resting lightly in his hand. The world around him seemed to blur, the hum of the city fading into the background as Clint's words replayed in his mind, use it as a seed, not a band-aid. A seed. James realized he hadn't thought of life that way in years. Every dollar he'd ever managed to scrape together had been spent on immediate needs, food, water, a temporary shelter. But this was different. Clint hadn't just given him money, he'd given him an opportunity. A challenge. Slowly, James stood up. The bill felt heavy in his pocket, as though it carried more than its monetary value. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he couldn't waste it. The first thing James did was walk to a nearby thrift store. The owner, a kind elderly woman named Martha, greeted him warmly. Looking for something specific, dear? She asked, her eyes soft behind her glasses. James hesitated before pulling out the $100 bill. I need art supplies, he said. Do you have anything like that? Martha's face lit up. Oh, you're in luck. A local school donated some supplies last week, paints, brushes, even a few small canvases. I'll let you have them for a good price. She led him to a corner of the store where a box of art supplies sat, slightly dusty but still in good condition. James felt a pang of excitement as he sifted through the items, tubes of paint in vibrant colors, brushes of various sizes, and a few stretched canvases. How much for everything? He asked, half expecting it to be beyond his reach. Martha tilted her head thoughtfully. For you. $20. James couldn't believe his luck. Are you sure? She smiled. I can see it in your eyes. You've got a story to tell. Go paint it. With the supplies purchased, James left the store with renewed purpose. He found a quiet spot in a nearby park, where he set up his first canvas. It felt surreal to hold a brush again, the weight of it both familiar and foreign. For hours, he painted. The colors flowed together, forming an abstract image of hope and despair, light and shadow. As the sun set, James looked at his finished work, a chaotic yet beautiful representation of his journey. The next day, James carried his painting to the same street corner where he had met Clint. This time, he wasn't sitting on the ground with a cardboard sign. Instead, he stood tall, his painting propped up beside him with a small sign that read, "Original artwork for sale." People stopped and stared. Some admired his work, others asked about the price. By midday, a young couple approached him, their interest genuine. "This is incredible," the woman said, her hand hovering over the canvas. "How much are you selling it for?" James hesitated. He didn't want to undervalue his work, but he also needed the sale. $50, he said finally. The couple exchanged a glance before the man pulled out his wallet. "We'll take it," he said with a smile. James felt a wave of gratitude as he handed over the painting. It was his first sale in years, and it felt like validation. With the money from the sale, James bought more supplies and created more paintings. Each piece reflected a part of his journey, his struggles, his resilience, his hope. He set up a small booth at the park, where people began to recognize him as the street artist with a story. Word spread quickly. A local reporter wrote an article about him, calling him the Phoenix Painter. The story detailed his encounter with Clint Eastwood and how it had reignited his passion. Within weeks, James received an invitation to showcase his work at a community art gallery. The gallery owner, a warm and enthusiastic woman named Clara, saw potential in his raw talent and heartfelt creations. "Your work speaks to people," Clara told him. "I want to help you share it with the world." The gallery exhibit was a success. James sold several pieces and even received commissions from patrons who admired his style. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of stability, and more importantly, purpose. Months later, James found himself in a completely different place, both literally and figuratively. He had moved into a modest apartment, surrounded by his art supplies and unfinished canvases. His work was gaining recognition, and he was no longer just surviving, he was living. One day, as he was setting up for another gallery exhibit, a familiar figure walked through the door. Clint Eastwood. James froze, his heart pounding. He had often thought about the man who had given him that $100 bill, but he never imagined he'd see him again. Clint approached him with a small smile. "Looks like you figured it out," he said, his tone warm. James grinned, his voice steady with gratitude. "I did. Because of you." Clint shook his head. "No, James. I just gave you a push. You did the rest." The two men talked for hours, sharing stories and laughter. Before Clint left, he glanced at one of James's paintings, a striking piece that captured the moment they had first met. "How much for this one?" Clint asked, a glint of humor in his eyes. James laughed. "For you. It's priceless." Though Clint insisted on paying for the painting, James refused to accept money from the man who had changed his life. Instead, he gifted it to Clint with a heartfelt note on the back of the canvas. "To the man who saw a seed in barren soil, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't. You gave me more than $100, you gave me a second chance." Clint smiled as he read the note, his eyes betraying a flicker of emotion. He promised to hang the painting in his home, a reminder of the power of small acts of kindness and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. As Clint left the gallery, James felt a sense of closure and a new sense of purpose. He realized that his journey was no longer just about his own survival, it was about inspiring others to believe in themselves. James began speaking at community centers, schools, and art workshops, sharing his story of transformation. He told audiences about the day he met Clint Eastwood and how a single act of kindness had set him on a path he never thought possible. "You don't need to be rich or famous to make a difference," James would say. "Sometimes, all it takes is $1, or even a word of encouragement, to change someone's life." His talks resonated deeply with people. Aspiring artists, struggling students, and even those battling their own demons found hope in his journey. James's art gained even more attention, not just for its beauty but for the powerful story behind it. One day, a young boy approached him after one of his talks. The boy, clutching a sketch pad, said, "Mr. James, I want to be an artist too, but everyone says it's a waste of time." James knelt down to the boy's level, looking him straight in the eye. "They're wrong," he said firmly. "If it's in your heart, it's never a waste of time. Keep drawing, keep dreaming, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The boy smiled, his eyes shining with newfound determination. As James's life blossomed, so did his impact on others. His story caught the attention of a documentary filmmaker, who wanted to capture his journey from the streets to the art world. The documentary, titled A Brush with Hope, premiered at a local film festival and received widespread acclaim. The film highlighted not just James's art but also the people who had supported him along the way: Martha at the thrift store, Clara at the gallery, and of course, Clint Eastwood. When Clint attended the premiere, he was met with a standing ovation. Though he remained humble about his role in James's transformation, it was clear that his simple gesture had set off a chain reaction of positivity and change. In an interview after the screening, Clint said, "It's never too late to turn things around. James is living proof of that. Sometimes, all someone needs is a little push in the right direction." As James's life blossomed, so did his impact on others. His story caught the attention of a documentary filmmaker, who wanted to capture his journey from the streets to the art world. The documentary, titled A Brush with Hope, premiered at a local film festival and received widespread acclaim. The film highlighted not just James's art but also the people who had supported him along the way: Martha at the thrift store, Clara at the gallery, and of course, Clint Eastwood. When Clint attended the premiere, he was met with a standing ovation. Though he remained humble about his role in James's transformation, it was clear that his simple gesture had set off a chain reaction of positivity and change. In an interview after the screening, Clint said, "It's never too late to turn things around. James is living proof of that. Sometimes, all someone needs is a little push in the right direction." Years passed, and James continued to thrive as an artist and speaker. He established a foundation to support struggling artists, providing them with the resources and mentorship they needed to pursue their passions. The foundation's motto was simple yet profound: plant the seed, nurture the dream. James's art was displayed in galleries around the world, but he always kept one piece for himself: the first painting he had created in the park after meeting Clint. It served as a reminder of where he had started and how far he had come. One evening, as James prepared for another exhibit, he received a letter from Clint. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, the message short but heartfelt. "Dear James, you've done more than I ever imagined. I'm proud of you. Keep inspiring. Clint **. James framed the letter and placed it in his studio, where it served as a beacon of inspiration for every artist who walked through the door. James's journey is a testament to the power of belief, both in oneself and in others. A single dollar may not seem like much, but when paired with encouragement and faith, it can become the spark that ignites a brighter future. From a homeless man on the streets to a celebrated artist and philanthropist, James proved that second chances are real and that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that change lives forever. As for Clint Eastwood, his role in the story reminds us that true greatness isn't just about success, it's about lifting others up and helping them see the greatness within themselves. James's story continued to capture hearts across the nation. His foundation grew rapidly, gaining support from influential figures in the art world and beyond. One day, he received an unexpected invitation, a letter from the President of the United States. "Dear James, your journey is a shining example of resilience and the human spirit. Your work has inspired countless individuals, including myself. I would like to invite you to the White House to share your story and discuss how we can better support the arts and those facing challenges similar to yours. Warm regards. The President." James was overwhelmed with emotion. This was a moment he could never have imagined during those years on the streets. He accepted the invitation and prepared to speak at an event that would include policymakers, artists, and advocates from all walks of life. At the White House, James stood at the podium, a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through him. The room was filled with people eager to hear his story. Clint Eastwood, seated in the front row, gave him an encouraging nod. James took a deep breath and began. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to stand here today, but I want to start by telling you something honest. There was a time when I didn't believe this moment, or any moment like it, could happen. I was homeless, hopeless, and convinced my dreams were out of reach. But then, someone gave me not just $1, but a challenge. A challenge to see my life not as an ending, but as a new beginning." He paused, letting the words sink in. "That someone was Clint Eastwood," James said, gesturing toward Clint, who smiled humbly. "He didn't just hand me money, he handed me a lifeline. He reminded me of the power of belief, and that's what I've tried to carry forward ever since." The audience erupted into applause, but James wasn't finished. "Art saved my life. It gave me a voice when I felt invisible, and it gave me purpose when I felt lost. I'm here today not just because of my story, but because I believe there are millions of others out there with untold stories, unpainted canvases, unwritten songs. They need the chance to be seen, heard, and believed in." The room was silent, captivated by his words. James concluded, "We may not all have the resources of a Clint Eastwood or a gallery owner, but we all have something to give, a word, a gesture, a moment of kindness. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything." James's speech sparked a national conversation about the importance of supporting the arts and providing opportunities for those in need. The government announced new initiatives to fund community art programs and provide resources for struggling artists. The impact of James's foundation multiplied as grants and donations poured in. New studios were built, scholarships were created, and countless lives were transformed through the power of art and mentorship. One evening, as James sat alone in his studio, he found himself thinking back to the first day he met Clint. He still remembered the weight of the $100 bill in his hand and the weight of Clint's words in his heart. Looking around at the vibrant paintings that filled his studio, James smiled. He knew the journey wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the countless lives that had been touched, the dreams that had been rekindled, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. With that thought, he picked up a blank canvas and began to paint, not for a gallery, not for a sale, but for himself. It was a portrait of hope, a reminder of how far he had come, and a testament to the idea that sometimes, the smallest seeds can grow into the most extraordinary trees. As James's story reached new heights, his influence began spreading internationally. News outlets from around the globe picked up his journey, dubbing him the artist who painted a second chance. Invitations to speak and exhibit his work poured in from countries as far away as Japan, France, and South Africa. In Tokyo, James attended an art summit where he met a young woman named Aiko, who approached him after his keynote speech. She shared her struggles as an artist, explaining how cultural and family expectations had pressured her to abandon her passion for painting. "Your story gave me courage," she told him, her voice trembling. "For the first time in years, I feel like I can pick up a brush again." James smiled warmly and said, "Don't just pick it up. Run with it. Paint your story, it deserves to be seen." Inspired by their meeting, Aiko later held her first solo exhibit in Tokyo, crediting James for reigniting her dream. One day, James received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a younger James, standing proudly in front of his first-ever gallery showing from years ago. Attached to the photo was a handwritten note. "James. I've kept this photo all these years because I knew you had something special. I'm so proud to see what you've become. Dad." James's heart raced as he read the note. His relationship with his father had been strained for decades, a casualty of misunderstandings and unspoken words. But now, this small gesture felt like an olive branch. James reached for his phone and dialed the number he had avoided for years. After a few rings, a familiar voice answered. "Dad?" James said, his voice trembling. There was a pause before his father replied, "It's been a long time, son." The conversation that followed was filled with emotion, apologies, gratitude, and the first steps toward reconciliation. James learned that his father had quietly followed his journey, beaming with pride even from afar. In the years that followed, James's foundation expanded its mission to include homelessness advocacy. He partnered with shelters, social workers, and community leaders to create programs that combined art therapy with practical support for those experiencing homelessness. One such program, called Canvas of Hope, offered free art classes and workshops in shelters, allowing participants to express their emotions and tell their stories through art. The initiative proved transformative, helping individuals find healing and even new careers as artists. James frequently visited these workshops, sitting among participants as they painted. He listened to their stories, shared his own, and reminded them that they were capable of more than they realized. "Your past doesn't define you," he often said. "What you do next, that's what matters." Years later, on the anniversary of the day he met Clint Eastwood, James organized a special event at his foundation's headquarters. He invited Clint as the guest of honor, wanting to publicly thank the man who had set everything in motion. The event was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by James's work, former workshop participants, young artists, and even community leaders. When Clint took the stage, he kept his speech brief but powerful. "James once told me I changed his life," Clint said, looking out at the crowd. "But the truth is, he's the one who did the hard work. All I did was remind him of what he already had inside. And now, he's done that for countless others. That's the real legacy." As the audience erupted into applause, James stepped forward and hugged Clint, tears streaming down his face. In the quiet of his studio that night, James began work on a new painting, a large, intricate piece he called The Ripple. It depicted a single drop of water creating waves that spread endlessly outward, touching everything in their path. The painting symbolized everything he had come to believe, that even the smallest act of kindness could create a ripple effect, transforming lives in ways no one could predict. When the painting was complete, James donated it to his foundation, where it was displayed in the main lobby as a source of inspiration for all who entered. James's journey became a story for the ages, a reminder that no matter how dire the circumstances, there is always hope. From a homeless man with a forgotten dream to a global force for good, he proved that a single moment of kindness could change the world. And as for Clint Eastwood, he carried James's gifted painting with him wherever he went, a reminder that even the smallest seeds, when nurtured, could grow into something extraordinary. The ripples of their meeting continued to expand, touching countless lives and proving that the power of belief, both in oneself and in others, could transform the world, one act of kindness at a time. As the years passed, James continued to inspire the world, but his focus shifted toward ensuring the longevity of his mission. He realized that true impact required building something that could outlive him, a legacy that would continue to uplift others long after he was gone. With this in mind, James established the Seed and Ripple Foundation, a global nonprofit dedicated to empowering artists, supporting the homeless, and fostering kindness in communities. The foundation's programs spanned continents, offering scholarships, mentorships, and grants to aspiring artists from underprivileged backgrounds. One of the foundation's flagship initiatives, $1, One Dream, encouraged people worldwide to donate a single dollar toward transforming lives. The campaign's simplicity resonated deeply, attracting millions of donors who wanted to be part of a movement that proved even the smallest contributions could spark profound change. In recognition of his contributions, James was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. When the news broke, the world celebrated the man who had turned his life around and dedicated it to uplifting others. James, however, remained humble, seeing the nomination as a testament to the collective effort of everyone who had supported him along the way. During the Nobel ceremony, James delivered a speech that became one of the most memorable moments of his life. "Standing here today, I'm reminded of the day I sat on a street corner, lost and invisible," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "I could never have imagined that a single act of kindness would lead me to this moment. But this isn't just my story, it's ours. It's about the power of belief, the strength of community, and the extraordinary potential in every human being." He ended with a simple but profound message: if you have the chance to plant a seed, do it. You may not see the ripples, but I promise you, they will change the world. Amid his professional successes, James found joy in his personal life. He reconnected with his family, and the bonds that had been strained for years were finally healed. His father, who had once been distant, became one of his biggest supporters, attending every event and proudly sharing stories about his son's achievements. James also found love with a fellow artist, Maya, whose passion for social change matched his own. The two built a life together, combining their talents to create art that inspired and advocated for global causes. Their collaborative pieces became iconic, representing the union of creativity and compassion. As James entered the later years of his life, he remained active in his foundation, continuing to mentor young artists and advocate for social change. He often reflected on the serendipity of meeting Clint Eastwood on that fateful day and how a single moment had set his life on a new trajectory. When James eventually passed away, the world mourned the loss of a man who had turned his pain into purpose. His funeral was attended by thousands, including Clint, who had remained a steadfast friend and supporter throughout the years. At the service, Clint spoke briefly but powerfully. "James taught us all something invaluable, that it's never too late to start over and never too late to make a difference. He was the ripple that turned into a wave, and his legacy will live on in the lives he's touched." Today, the Seed and Ripple Foundation thrives, guided by the principles James lived by. His story is taught in schools, featured in documentaries, and celebrated in art galleries worldwide. In the lobby of the Foundation's headquarters, the Ripple painting still hangs, a reminder of the moment that changed everything. Beneath it, a plaque bears James's favorite quote: "Plant the seed, nurture the dream, and watch the world transform." Through his art, his advocacy, and his unwavering belief in the power of kindness, James's legacy continues to inspire generations to believe in themselves and each other.